Hi everyone, welcome to episode 18 of On My Studio Table. Welcome if you've never been before, and welcome also if you're a regular viewer. I just so appreciate the fact that people are interested in what I'm doing and what I'm sharing in my videos. And if you like what you see, please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so, please subscribe. You can subscribe just to a playlist, so if you're only interested in the Studio Table series, only subscribe to that playlist. But I do have other videos there too, which may be of interest to you. This is the triptych that I've been working on. 3 panels of eco-printed wool, which I've started to embroider. And in fact, I think I am almost finished. I didn't want to obscure the eco-prints too much, as I mentioned in my last video. And I thought if I just highlight some of the brown onion skin prints, that would be enough. And it nearly is. I just have 2 small holes, one of which is marked by a pin on the middle panel. I'm not sure if it's on camera or not. And the other one is behind me. And I did show a close-up of that in the last video. I did some needle felting on it with my needle felting machine, which is called an embellisher. And then I embroidered over the top of the needle felting. And I wasn't sure at the time whether it suited the piece, but I think if I add more to 1 or 2 of the other panels, it will work. And then the only other thing I need to do is to make a way of hanging them up. At the moment they are just pinned onto clothes hangers, but we do have a really nice black metal rod, which I think will suit this. So also in this video I will show you some close-ups of the stitching that I've done. Some I did share with you last time, and I'll share with you some of the new stitching that I've done, still in the same style as the others, but each one is also individual because I do them freestyle. I don't draw anything in advance, I just use the onion skin print as the inspiration and my guideline. The threads I've used, as I've mentioned before, are Ginny Thompson flower threads. They are cotton, but they are soft, so they feel like using wool thread actually rather than cotton. I bought them from someone who had a quilting shop but is actually retiring, and so I'm nearly buying up everything that she has in the colours that I use. They are really beautiful threads. I'm not sure where else you would find them, but I'm sure if you Google them you'll find a source somewhere near you, or at least that you can order online and have mailed to you. In this video I'm also going to share the progress on my art quilt. I still haven't decided on a name for it. It's the one that has the layers of eco-printed wool and cotton and then mulberry bark over the top. And I've nearly finished quilting the mulberry bark onto the other 2 layers. And I'm really enjoying it. And I'll be adding the strip of eco-printed silk with the couch strips, which is laid on some hand-dyed cotton, which I bought from the Thread Studio. And the silk that shows through the windows in the mulberry bark is also from that same source, and I think I shared a link in the last video. The threads I'm using in that one are mostly pearl cottons, but I'm also using some stranded embroidery cotton, but using all the strands, not dividing it up. So I'll explain a bit more about that when I show it to you. My journal also has some new pages, and I didn't share anything in the last one because I hadn't finished them, so you'll get 2 in this video. I'm also sharing what it's like to go foraging on our property, and I'm going to show you that first because that's where all my eco-printing begins. The trees are interesting because they have self-sown on the side of the property where we've built our house, which was just pasture, and we have allowed some of them to keep growing. The wattle trees are medium-sized trees, so they're not an issue if they're reasonably close to the house. But the gum trees, the eucalypts, they grow extremely tall. They are very big trees. I think I share 3 or 4 varieties in this foraging section, and they can be anything from 90 to 300 feet tall. So when I pick the leaves from them, I'm actually pruning them, and I do mention that as I'm foraging. If you're in a park or on the roadside or any public space, please don't pick off the trees because that is not our property, and in some instances they are protected. But on our property we need to keep these trees within some reasonable size where it won't endanger our home. So by pruning them, I keep them small. Having said that, some of them are getting away from me, and so we may ultimately have to cut them down. And that would be a real shame because I do love the trees. But on the other side of the road, which is a road that goes through our property, we are leaving the trees alone. So that's 11 acres of trees that we are not touching at all. And if I do get leaves from that side, I will only pick windfalls. I won't take them from the trees. Partly the reason for that is the trees are so tall I can't actually reach the leaves, but even if I could, I wouldn't harvest from that side of the road. That's the area that we have become officially a land for wildlife property. Also, what that means is that we need to keep an eye on weeds, introduced weeds. We have found some and we are dealing with them on both sides of the road. Some of them were here when we came, some of them have been brought in since, not by us. And we are actually asking questions of our local council because of that. So I hope you enjoy the video. I've really enjoyed putting it together for you, and thank you for sharing time with me. I've just come out onto our back veranda, and this is what we see every day. I see this view when I sit at the dining table, when I sit on the couch in the lounge, and this is facing northeast. But I'm about to head off and collect some leaves, and you'll see here that there are some small trees ahead of me. Some of them are black wattles, some of them are eucalyptus, and it's the eucalyptus trees that I'm going to go for. I've come close to one of the small eucalyptus trees, and I'm just going to pick some of them, and I'll just pick short branches of leaves because in essence it's like pruning the tree. I'm just going to put them in my basket and come around. I don't know if you can hear the birds, but the birds are singing, and you can see new growth on the trees near the creek. That fence is our boundary on this side of the property, and the sun is out and it's just a beautiful day. We did have a frost this morning, even though it's spring, and it was a cool start, but with the fire it soon warmed up, and fortunately our fire goes all night, so all I have to do is put some logs in it in the morning and it gets going. I also don't take too much from any of the trees. I just take a little bit here and there, and then I go to another tree, and that way they don't get stressed out. So I'm now facing the house, and I'll just grab some more leaves. Usually I use scissors to do this, of course, because I'm holding my device, I can't actually do that. Some of these leaves have been eaten as well. We do have a gum beetle that really gets stuck into these sometimes, and that means that the trees get stressed. So then I tend to leave them for a while until we've had some rain and they've had a chance to recover. If I look this way, you will see two of our sheds, and looking towards the west and northwest. I quite often harvest from these small eucalypts, but they are under stress at the moment. Something has been eating them really seriously. So, and you can see that the bottom branches have actually died, and this is a change that has happened in the last month or so. Whether this tree will recover or this pair of trees will recover, I don't know. We may have to cut them down, but we'll just wait and see. It is lovely having them here, and they've been really great for harvesting. I haven't picked these for at least a couple of months, and it's so totally changed. And you don't really notice it from the house, but when you come up close you realise. This tree has had a bit of a checkered history. Sometimes it gets really badly eaten by the beetles, and then other times it just comes back and it's so vigorous. And it's actually like that now. And once again, I just take just sprigs, I guess you could say. And that way, again, as I said, I prune them and also keep it under control. Just move further on down the paddock towards the east. This is a small tree that's another kind of eucalyptus. I'm not sure what kind it is. I'm waiting for the report from the Northeast Bioregional Network to find out what it is. But it's a beautiful orange printer. And so I'm just going to pick some sprigs from this for my next eco-printing session. And these rushes are a native and we've allowed them to grow. And behind this is where we're developing a small native garden to go with these plants. And you can see here one of the trees that has blown over in the past, which we'll probably use for firewood, although there's not much there. And Ian's tractor just hiding in the distance. I've now gone a bit further east of the house, and this tree looks similar to the first one that I was harvesting from, but I've been told it's actually not. I can't remember the exact name. It's named after a person called Brooker. The other one at the beginning of the video was ovata. So I'm going to pick some leaves here. Some of these are new growth, so I won't be using them, but I will use the mature leaves. I've not harvested from this tree before. I don't know what variety it is. It is different to the other ones because it has longer leaves. So I'm going to pick some and just give it a try. So now I'm heading back to the house. There's my basket. It's quite full. I have 3 types of eucalyptus leaves, some banksia and some bracken fern, all of them growing within a few metres of our house. I did 2 batches of eco printing this week, and this shows you the clothing that I did. I would normally have done them in one batch, but on the first day that I did the eco printing I wasn't feeling 100%. So I just did 3 cardigans, which you can see hanging on the cupboard here, and then the next day I did the little vest and some fabric, which I will show you separately. So I'll just go a bit closer and just show you the prints on them. These were all darker colours, so this one was a kind of a coffee colour, and as you can see the print still worked on that, and I used eucalyptus and banksia leaves on this cardigan. This one is a drapey cardigan, and it is mostly cotton. It also had some angora, I think only about 10%, so this is more monochromatic. But I think it would look great worn with some brighter colours or even with black. It's a really good contrast. And I should mention that the first cardigan is possibly cashmere, but it didn't have any labels on it. But it feels soft like cashmere. The vest is a hand knitted vest. Somebody threw it in the washing machine, I think, and it felted. But it's actually still a really nice vest. I may have to replace the buttons because they're slightly too big for the buttonholes and they don't come undone very easily. But that again was a brownish colour and has printed really well. And the last one here is a jacket which I think somebody may also have accidentally felted. And the light makes it look lighter here, but it's actually quite a dark colour. but still the leaves have printed really well. And I love how I get orange tones from some of the leaves on the trees that we have. So these are all done with the leaves that I picked in the foraging video, and all done in my dirty pot on 2 separate days, and they were all wrapped around rusty cans. Some were more rusty than others because they take a while to become rusty when you first start using them. And as I showed you in the last video, this is the view from my studio window. Beautiful sunny day, no wind, which is so lovely, and the package that you can see sitting in the garden bed is some mulch that I'm going to spread out around the white flowering plants that I've put in. These pieces of fabric are wool and silk. The wool is vintage blanket and the silk is also vintage. And I did these face to face, so if you look closely you'll see that there are mirror images visible on this, and when I turn them over, of course, they won't be mirror images, but the great thing is that they are reversible. I don't use barriers as some eco dyes and printers do, because I like the fact that you've got 2 sides to choose from when you use them in projects or however you want to display them. I used eucalyptus leaves, banksia, and I was going to use fern, but the fern dried up before I used it, so I didn't end up putting that in the layers. I also used rusty cans, and the string lines on the left at the lower part of the piece of wool because that was on the outside of the bundle. These were all done in my dirty pot, which is my perpetual dye pot or an ongoing dye pot. I don't throw out the liquid, I just keep topping it up. These are the same fabrics but turned the other way around. So the back, as you can see, is not in mirror image, but really interesting complex prints. I love the idea that not everything is totally distinct. I do like the layers of prints as well, so some are obvious and some are more in the background. I think that gives it a lot of depth. I did wrap these around rusty cans, as I said, but you can only see a can print on the top of the silk piece on the right. It doesn't show up on the wool piece on this side, but it does on the other side. I also should mention that the orange highlights are from brown onion skins, sometimes called yellow onions. This is some of the fabric that I eco-printed this past week. A piece of vintage blanket. It still has its original blanket stitch on it. And as I unroll it, you can see that it's quite dark, but the prints are really interesting. And the end where the rusty cans were is the darkest. I keep these on a cardboard tube because once I've ironed them, I don't really want them to get creased again. But you can see how complex the prints are. I don't overthink what I do with the arrangement of the leaves and so on. I just allow it to evolve as I work, and I lay them out with too much planning. And this end is actually the end that was on the outside of the bundle, as I mentioned elsewhere in the video. And I do love those string lines. But here you can see eucalyptus, and that was the kind that I wasn't sure if it would print, and it has printed beautifully. Onion skins, you can see other eucalyptus leaves in the shadows there too, and I just love the effect. I wanted to lay the silks on top of the vintage wool so that I could use the same leaves for two fabrics, and I ended up using a third piece because this piece wasn't quite big enough, and I added this piece onto the bottom, as you'll see in the other part of this video that I've explained. And again, I've rolled them around some tubes. I saved these from things like plastic wrap and baking paper. So that's one side of this smaller piece, and then this is the other side. And you'll see in the other part of the video how this side is a mirror image of what is on the vintage wool, because they were laid together. And then when I unroll the other one, you'll see the can prints just here, which I really love. And here you can see the prints of the onion skins and the eucalyptus leaves. And I just love the effect. This is vintage silk that was given to me by a friend who was destashing when she was diagnosed with a terminal illness, so it's a bit special to me. Here you can see a very clear Banksia print. So all of these, as I said, grow on our property, and you watched me forage for these at the beginning of the video. Beautiful fabric. So some of this will go to new VIP members, and some of it may ultimately be for sale at www.gonerustic.com. Here is my journal number 2. As you know, the first one is absolutely full with half a year's worth of slow stitching exercises. As I've mentioned, this is an exercise that we're doing with Catherine Chambers of K3N Clothtales, and it's been such a pleasure to do. Every week we have a different project to do, and this one is getting quite full too, because we're getting closer to the end of the year, of course. So the one I wanted to show you, well actually two that I wanted to show you, this one first. The theme was monochrome, and I got out some green strips, and then I thought I can edge towards lime green, but then they became yellow, and then some other colours asked to be let in, so it ended up not being monochrome. And when I did the circle, which was part of the original suggested design, I couched some yarn down and it seemed to need some red. So it's definitely not monochrome. But the idea was to weave strips of cloth So I just used strips of offcuts of naturally dyed wool blanket, put them onto a foundation of naturally dyed wool, which is quite a thin piece of fabric, and I've used that for a few of these exercises. And then just did simple running stitch to put them down once I'd woven the strips together. And then once I'd couched the circle down, I just did some extra lines around the circle. The bit of journal writing that I've put with it, I just remembered the acacia blossom that I shared a couple of videos ago. It was so beautiful, and it was such a beautiful lemon-coloured yellow, and it just lit up the whole landscape, not just on our property but all over northern Tasmania and probably further as well. And it just made me remember, because it's got this yellow in this weaving here. So that's what I wrote about. The remembered glow of acacia trees, like sunshine on a cloudy day. The next theme was inspired by the famous Gee's Bend quilters. This was a community that really was very poor and had been kind of forgotten, but the women used all sorts of fabrics to make amazing quilts, and they are now collected by artists and museums all over North America and probably further afield as well. And one of their very popular designs was called Housetop. So it reminds me a little bit of either a log cabin design or a courthouse steps design. But they made it their own because they were so spontaneous with their fabrics and their colour choices, also substituting colours and fabrics which we may not have chosen, but they made it work somehow. Very free design. So if you look up Gee's Bend, you will see what I'm talking about. So this was inspired by them, and Catherine did an example for us, and then we were encouraged to do our own version. So I've used a mixture of silk, that's a bit of old kimono silk, even cotton interlock there, this is a bit of wool, and the other pieces are cotton or linen or silk, and then very simple quilting to hold it all together onto a foundation piece. And I was inspired to include a bit of writing about a brown falcon that flew over me one morning when I went out to have my cuppa on the veranda. And it actually flew over the house, and I thought that was quite apt for this design. I heard the brown falcon again. It flew directly over me and then over the house. I've done a lot of stitching on this art quilt since I showed it to you last. Now I've had to show it to you sideways here because it is quite big, and because it's a rectangle it shows up better on this screen when I have it round this way, but it actually goes around that way when it's finished. So you can see I've added some stitching here. This kind of naturally folded, so I thought I'd stick with that, and I've stitched that down with red thread. And then underneath these, which I'm just about to attach, I've done a lot of quilting. I don't know if you can see it. I've quilted across the whole piece. I'll just move that as well. And also around what I call the windows. So they are now all held down with a good amount of stitching. I've done black running stitch, some couching, and then some stab stitch. And then all through it I have a running stitch as a quilting stitch, and it goes through all the layers. You can see it on the back here as well, which is what I wanted. And what I've done is I've hidden all my knots in between the layers, except on the edge where they'll be hidden by the edging when I stitch that on. So I'm really happy with how this is going. I love how the colours work together. And it all started because I did a journal page with some couching similar to what I've done on here, and I thought I'd like to do a bit more of that, so I did it on a piece of eco-printed silk, and then I had this lovely piece of hand-dyed fabric which I purchased to go behind. And then you would have seen in the last video also that I have a piece of cocoon stripping that's going to go down there, and then there's another strip of cloth that's going to meander down the length of this. So I'm really enjoying this and very happy with how it's going, and possibly the next time I share it, it'll be finished.